I don't know whether they've seen your latest series, which I absolutely love, the Jengaboru Curse. I don't know if you have seen it. You must. It's quite fascinating. And the first streaming series that you've made, right? We'll talk a little about that. But before that, I want to discuss your book, which I absolutely loved, which is your memoir. And it talks about your generation sort of being the middle one between your father's generation with its connection to the land and to the earth, and your son's generation, which is the virtual generation. And, you know, really what we have done to ourselves and to our planet, this generation especially. And what do we look forward to? So you want to talk about that?
Thank you for having me here. Yeah, I mean, the idea of this book was my kid was 9 years old and we were going to the village, and so on the way back he said, "Dad, you're a liar." I said, "Why am I a liar?" He said, "You said your village was like this, 4 months you were cut off from the communication, you know, you saw a bike van, you saw this TV van." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I want to tell you something more to that." He said, "It's not only me, but there's perception outside the world also." So I explained him about the whole Kalahandi syndrome, okay?
Yeah.
How famine never left us behind, you know. So when I went to Delhi, it was around, I think, 2001 or 2. So one of my friends was getting married to a Punjabi girl, and her mother came and asked this guy that, "Tumhare want radio aa gaya?" So then I realized that it's very important for the new generation, my kid or anybody. The idea of writing the book was to document the world we had lived in,
Yes.
document the world we have faced. And especially it is our generation, which is what I wrote very strongly in the book also. It is us who are actually it's like a criminal act what we have done to the planet in terms of pollution, climate change effect, everything. It is this 5 decades which we have taken so much of energy from the planet that we can't undo things anymore. So the idea of writing the 5 decades is the journey I lived in, but most of us probably in this room had. So I thought, let me just put, I'm not great in writing, but I thought, let me just put it down and say that. And which is what I've been doing. If you see my Water Trilogy,
Yes.
or Jengaboru, everything is about that. And, you know, like, so one of the interesting fact was when I released the trailer, Jengaboru, the first thing one of my friend called from US and said that, "Aren't you scared?" I said, "Why?" "No, there's mining mafias will kill you." I said, why would somebody kill me? I'm just telling a story which is true. Because most of the facts in that series is also from facts,
Yes.
which we all are living and we all know.
Yeah, and I think you've always stuck to the truth. I mean, you know, speaking truth to power is a very fancy term, but your work has always been political. You've always made a political point, much before climate change was even a buzzword. So what was it that you understood before most of us did, what we were doing to our planet?
I think coming from this one way you tell the stories, like you sit in the jail like Jafar Panahi in Iran, and you tell the story and become a rebellious, you know. I believe that there is always this establishments are for a human being, and stories can contribute a lot to change over in your own life and others too, you know. My idea was, it all comes from the land I comes from, you know, it all comes from the world I have lived in. So when I started storytelling, which was likely, you know, mostly about child labor and women's issues, you know, I worked on a documentary, you know, for Barbara Broccoli, Stolen Childhood. I shot almost 31 countries around the world, and that's what gave me the power, a window, saying that how important these stories are to tell to the world, and which is what I had been doing. Way back, if you see from I Am Kalam to Kaun Kitne Pani Mein, it is through characters I have almost questioned the establishment. That the drought, the famine we suffered in Odisha is all man-made.
Yes.
So that point of time, probably people did not realize. After Jengaburu, a lot of people started writing about that, oh, it was really a question against the establishment. So I think this idea of motivation was basically where that humble village to the journey, what I saw globally, how much we have, you know, how much our world or the whole so-called development has impact to our own life.
And also the idea of being a migrant. I mean, you carried that very strongly in your heart. You know, when you went from Odisha to Delhi, you talk about living in a barsati with 8 other people, and the only way they would keep you is if you cooked for them and washed their clothes. And you know, we suddenly woke up to migrants during the pandemic, but all of us are migrants in some way or the other. Some live in harsher conditions. What was your experience as a migrant from Odisha to Delhi?
Well, I think all of us go through that, but it is, I think you tend to learn a lot from others. That sharing, living in that eight people with 2 rooms, and these were the effect of their life probably has made me what I am today, more than affecting negatively. And we all are migrant, you know, nobody has an original place, you know, which is why I come back to the story like Jengaburu, where you talk about these legends or the stories, you know, which all comes from the truth.
Yeah. I mean, every legend has that kernel of truth. Every legend has, in fact, talk a little about Jengaburu, which people may not be too familiar with. Talk about the series and what led you to make it. It's on Sony Live, by the way, if you've not seen it.
Well, it's the stories which we have been hearing, like how my village established, you know, and my eldest father who was alive, and he said that we don't belong to this village, which is what I mentioned in the book also, that Amor Ga au Kotitila. So our village was somewhere else. And how it came is the river.
Right.
So is Jengaburu. Jengaburu almost opens like on National Geography show about ants coexisting together with animals.
Yeah.
And suddenly you have a blasting of that. So it's basically you almost cut down that 50 years and boom, you know, that to give a shock to the audience that this is the story I'm going to tell. Okay? And the whole idea, you know, it's only, not only the stories of Jengaburu is about the story, but it's also bringing Odisha out, you know, in whatever image, whatever reality it is. So the story belongs to a place where the legend says, you know, like in many places, if you see there is a temple in the mountain, you know, on the hilltop, because they wanted to protect the hills.
Right.
And these hills are perennial source of water for the rivers they're feeding. And this story was based on one of the hills close to where I grew up. So one day they said that, okay, there is precious bauxite in it. Means the day the hill goes, the perennial source of water goes, the river will dry up, jungle will dry up, no animal survives, what will happen to me? And that is the reason I wanted to tell the story to the world.
You know, I love the cover of the book, which has this tree with roots on the heel. This, in many ways, is you. Your roots, you've never lost them.
Now, idea of that is also how we describe. So my grandmother used to tell this, that how you are the tree. And you see the tree outside, but they have a life also. And she would always say that anything we hurt, whether it's just stone, leaves, or anything, she would say, all of them have lives. You can't touch them.
Right, even if it's a stone.
Even if it's a stone, if it is not a dry piece of wood. She says, there is life in it. And that got me scared, you know, which is what was my main base of the story in Jengaburu. But of course, because it's a thriller, it goes to another space. So sometimes we don't identify that, but I try to.
It goes to lots of spaces, London, New York. It's quite a fancy thriller. But talking about roots, Odisha has always been in you. And as Mani Shankarai was saying, the Congress may have left him, but the Congress is very much part of him. Again, Odisha is very much part of you, wherever you go.
I think I'm fighting it for myself. Of course,
Why?
I'm telling stories. I can't, you know, when like I went to Delhi, and though, that point of time, there were a lot of discussion about identity. What is Odia? Odia identity.
Right.
Today, if anybody talks, I kind of get into fights,
Why?
Well, this is very
The
sentimental.
idea of the Odisha being siesta country?
More to that, the first fight I had was in Delhi Connaught Place, and we come out from a restaurant, and this guy said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Odisha." He said, "Acha, jahan बच्चे बेच के माँ बाप खाना खाते हैं."
Kalahandi.
Kalahandi. And I never wanted to talk about it. I said, I'll create image. So every film, show, anything I do, I always, if you see Kadvi Hawa also, which is about extreme weather conditions, about two people. So the guy who comes from Odisha, who faced the cyclone, if you remember Gunu's story. And it is me fighting for my own self, because I wanted to bring my stories to the world to say that, look, it is not that. Kalahandi syndrome, the feminine syndrome gone long back. So, but they never leave you aside. Today when there is an article also, I remember New York Times wrote about cyclone, said the poorest state of India. I mean, come on, it's time not to say that. I'm against it. You can't write like that. They give, one of the guy in JNU, I won't name it now, one activist started saying that this boy from poor Kalahandi. Kalahandi is one of the richest district today. So they don't leave your identity back, which is why I said that I keep fighting myself to tell this story, so that you create that aura. Today you have something precious which they wanted to dig.
Yeah.
Imagine North Korea is interested for a small land in Odisha. So we are priceless,
Right. Like the MasterCard ad. No, but more than that, talk a little about this whole struggle. As you said, you've got into fights, you've got into arguments. What does this struggle never end? I mean, can Odisha's character, can its identity, is it still frozen in that time, or has it changed?
It is changing, something like when you do a hockey World Cup, the perception change. This is more than economy or anything. It is perception business, what social media story says. And as Odia, I must say, probably most of the people would agree here, we're not show-up people. We are not shoshabaji. Now, of course, the new generations with Instagram, Twitter, we talk a lot, but still we are not show-up people, which is why probably we face this kind of consequences. If you see the changes in terms of its economy, development, sports, everything, it's a leader state. It's, our people, the names, if you see, from doctors to artists, Sudarshan Patnaik, they were creating names. I think, which is why I said when they talk about identity, I said, don't talk about identity, talk about what we do, and which is what my cinema does. So one of the review, one of the film critics also, when he started Jengaburukar, said that, I think the first thing he started talking about famine. I called him, I said, like, why do you write that? You talking about films. I said, no, I wanted to put it in a positive note, but I said, I don't want to have that. That's gone long back. Right. And it's still painful, because I don't, it's not that I want to hear or not. I'm changing that through my stories. That's all I can do.
Right. What are you working on next?
Well, I mean, it's all set for the new one. I'm doing a new story which is on quantum computing.
On?
The future of quantum computing.
Which, sorry?
Quantum computing.
Oh, quantum computing. Yeah. My God, that's something.
Yeah, I mean, because AI eventually will land to that trouble. So it's a futuristic story.
Right.
So halfway through, so let's see.
The other thing that I loved was this almost cinematic scene that you recount, where your son suddenly goes to a tree which you know very well, which you have seen for many, many years, and sees this natural wonder of fireflies, and it just wows him. There is still the possibility of wonder in this very cruel and toxic world?
Well, of course, I think realizing that itself is, especially last few years, if we see that wonders, we wanted to keep it intact now. At least that realization is good enough. Like I said, unless we mainstream these talks, it's otherwise environment issue is just about the article you read or, you tweet
Right.
and that gets over. Until and unless we make it mainstreaming, whether it's in cinema, books, talks, fights, we can't get into that. But good factors is post-COVID probably it made us realize that we are in deep shit. So that's good enough. I think that's how the wonders will be intact now at least. We talk about rivers, we talk about, so which is why I wrote about the river also. It is an open craft museum.
Right. And a very strong connection that you have with the river, your relationship with it, and you swim in it, and it takes you places. That connection with the Mahanadi, again, do you want to tell us a little more about it?
I think river is something, if you grow on a bank of the river, it is almost like, for me, it's almost like motherly relationship, because I had a very, in a way, troubled childhood. The only savior for me was the river, because it's almost like the joy, entertainment, emotional relationship, everything was river. And first, my storytelling also I learned from river, because there are two fishermen who used to tell me stories in the evening.
Oh, okay.
Haluda and Magam.
Right.
So these two people were the guys, who probably made me what I am today, in terms of storytelling.
Right. But also you talk about sharing space with your father and all of the brothers wanting, to sleep with the father because he would tell lovely stories as well. That tradition of storytelling, which again is very much in our blood, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think storytelling, which is what the first chapter says, that everybody loves a good story. I think stories is what actually, in sitting in this room also, it's a story which makes our life brighter. I think that's the best thing happened, today, which is why, it's probably a good time when people are going to cinema halls watching stories. I think, it's like the way you need food, cloth, you need those stories to come to you.
Is there something that you'd like to say about the next generation? You seem to be quite hopeful of what they will do compared to what we have done. What gives you that hope?
Well, I think I'm very optimistic, and it's not the hope or anything. I can see the reality. Today's children, when my child was in the school, now he's doing undergrad in San Francisco. When I
What's
speak
he
to
studying?
them, he's studying music.
Okay.
So when I went to US also 2 months back, and I was talking to his friends as well, the kind of clarity they have about environment, gender equality, life, health, it's unbelievable. So I think which is what made me not optimistic but very hopeful that the world will be better. It is us only who become greedy. We wanted faster growth. So more than need, we went on doing, exploring everything, and the consequences are here. So these children, the new generation kids who are in their 20s are incredible in terms of understanding everything.
You think personally and professionally we've all paid a price. You talk about having paid a price for sort of following your dream, chasing your dream.
I think so. I think our generation is the most lalchi generation, I would say. Greedy, lalchi, whatever you call, because it is our parents who had actually struggled for the independent India, from that poor country to what we have made today, or developing, fast growing developing nation. It was us. It is just the greed what made us, what we see today.
Right. And I think the idea that there is still hope, all your films have in a way reflected that, whether it was I Am Kalam or even Kadvi Hawa, all of them have some kernel of hope. What apart from the young people of India do you still have hope from?
Well, I think it's only, if you see my films, especially the trilogy, the first one is Kaun Kitne Pani Mein, about how we created the world.
Right.
you know, man-made famine. Second was extreme weather conditions. If the third one you probably did not see, which is called Kalita Atita, which is almost like a silent
I
film,
haven't seen that. Sorry.
which is apocalyptic, that the
Right.
world will finish. So I wanted to give that shock. And that's how the whole idea seed happen of Jengaburu is from that no, there could be still hope that he can fight back.
Right.
So I think that hope on environment, on this planet, on the river, the forest, everything is the new hope which is raised in Jengaburu in a way, that I can fight for it.
And I think you have a lot of hope, especially from women.
Yeah, of course. I mean, what you see, this bill to everything, it is women, you know, who can change the world. I remember when I started.
Yeah. Today
Hello. Yeah. So I was working with this organization called the Hunger Project, and I was traveling to Bangladesh and India and many states when the 73rd Amendment came and women become panchayat leaders. And that's when I saw the power that they can actually change the world.
Right. So do you have hope from the women's reservation bill? I have to ask you a political question.
Absolutely. I mean, this was much needed, you know. This is the best thing happened in the recent time. And if you see, Odisha had done it earlier also, because there are a lot of women leaders they had sent, which is very important. And they can balance out the world anytime better, even in the environment issues, than anybody else.
And that again is a very Odia thing, right? The goddess, the mother goddess.
Yeah, it's almost like it's not, but it's almost like a matriarchal society, like, you know, northeastern states. We always, in our homes, it is women who have the, not I would say power, but who actually rule the house.
Yes, they rule it everywhere, but they don't necessarily get the credit.
Yeah, but in our homes, you know, it was my mother's sister. They had more power than the men say. You know, their say was much. Anytime, even in marriage, you know, in our smaller villages, we had never seen anything against women.
Right. So Nila Madhab Panda, thank you very much for joining us, for giving us your stories, for continuing to tell difficult stories. And more power to you.
Thank you. Thank you.